Hello everyone. In this video I'll be explaining chapter 2 Modern Historians of Ancient India from India's Ancient Past by R.S. Sharma. In this chapter we'll be discussing about modern historians and their approach to study ancient Indian history. Basically in this chapter we are going to study about three approaches. First one is colonialist approach, second is nationalist, and third is communalist approach. So let's get started with the colonialist view and their contribution. Although एजुकेटेड इंडियंस ने ट्रेडिशनल हिस्ट्री थी जो इंडिया की उसको प्रिजर्व करके रखा हुआ था हैंड रिटन एपिक्स, पुरानाज और सेमी बायोग्राफिकल वर्क के रूप में. Modern research in the history of ancient India began only in the second half of the 18th century to serve the needs of the British colonial administration. When Bengal and Bihar fell under the rule of the British East India Company in 1765, they found it difficult to administer the Hindu law of inheritance. Therefore, in 1776, the Manu Smriti, the law of Book of Manu, which was considered authoritative, was translated into English as a code of Gento laws. Pandits and Maulvis were there to administer. The initial effort to understand ancient laws and customs, which continued largely until the 18th century, culminated in the establishment in Calcutta in 1784 of the Asiatic Society of Bengal. It was set up by a civil servant of the East India Company, Sir William Jones. वो पहले ऐसे थे जिन्होंने ये सजेस्ट किया कि संस्कृत, लैटिन और ग्रीक एक सेम फैमिली ऑफ लैंग्वेजेस से बिलोंग करती है. ही ऑल्सो ट्रांसलेटेड द प्ले नोन एज अभिज्ञान शकुंतलम इनटू इंग्लिश इन 1789 और भगवद गीता को विल्किंस ने 1785 में इंग्लिश में ट्रांसलेट किया था. The Bombay Asiatic Society was set up in 1804, and the Asiatic Society of Great Britain was set up in London in 1823. William Jones emphasized that originally the European languages were very similar to Sanskrit, an Iranian language. This enthused European countries such as Germany, France and Russia to foster Indological studies. The greatest impetus to Indological studies was given by the German-born scholar F. Max Muller, who was largely based in England. The revolt of 1857 caused Britain to realize that it badly needed a deeper knowledge of the manners and social systems of an alien people over whom it ruled. Similarly, Christian missionaries ने भी स्टार्ट किया इसके बारे में जानना, इंडियन लॉस के बारे में जानना, ताकि वो लोग अनकवर कर सके उन वल्नरेबिलिटीज़ की, उन कमज़ोर कड़ियों को ढूंढ सके जिस हिंदू रिलीजन की, ताकि वो लोग कन्वर्ट्स विन कर सके और ब्रिटिश एम्पायर को स्ट्रेंथन कर सके. टू मीट दीज नीड्स, एंशिएंट स्क्रिप्चर्स वर translated on a massive scale under the editorship of Max Muller. Max Muller and other Western scholars made certain generalizations. उन्होंने खुद के कुछ ओपिनियन बनाए थी, कुछ जनरलाइजेशन बनाए about the nature of ancient Indian history and society. They stated that the ancient Indians lacked a sense of history, especially the element of time and chronology. उन्होंने ये बात भी ऐड की कि इंडियंस थे उनको आदत हो गई थी डेस्पोटिक रूल की. एंड ऑल्सो नेटिव्स वर सो इनग्रोस्ड इन द प्रॉब्लम्स ऑफ स्पिरिचुअलिज्म और of the next world that they felt no concern about the problems of this world. The Western scholars stressed that Indians had experienced neither a sense of nationhood nor any form of self-government. Many of the generalizations were made in the early history of India by Vincent Arthur Smith, who wrote in 1904 the first systematic history of ancient India. His book which was based on in-depth study of the available sources, uh, which gave primacy to political history. Smith's approach to history was pro-imperialist, as he was a lawyer member of the Indian Civil Services. back then वो इंडियन सिविल सर्विसेज ब्रिटिश ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी के कंट्रोल में थी. He emphasized the role of foreigners in ancient India. Alexander's invasion accounted for almost one third of his book. India was presented as a land of despotism, which had no experience and had not experienced political unity until the establishment of British rule. He observes, उन्होंने कहा ऐसे कि autocracy is substantially the only form of government with which the historians of India is concerned. British interpretation of Indian history served to denigrate the Indian character and achievements and justify colonial rule. They were trying to justify colonial rule. A few of these observations appear to have some validity. कुछ पॉइंट तक हम वैलिडिटी दे सकते हैं, बट ज़्यादा नहीं. Thus in comparison to Chinese, Indians did not show any strong sense of chronology, although in the earlier stage जो important events थी उनको गौतम बुद्धा की डेथ के साथ में रेफ़र किया जाता था, उसके साथ में उसके जोड़कर देखा जाता था. However, generalization made by colonialist historians were by and large either false or grossly exaggerated. बहुत बड़ा चढ़ाकर बता रखा था. Nationalist approach and its contribution. All this naturally came as a great challenge to Indian scholars, particularly to those who had received Western education. They were upset by the colonialist distortions of their past history. वो लोग थोड़े upset थे नेशनलिस्ट अप्रोच के हिस्टोरियंस, इंडियन हिस्टोरियंस इस बात को, इंडियन स्कॉलर्स इस बात से बहुत अपसेट थे कि कॉलोनियलिस्ट पास्ट इंडियन हिस्ट्री को, जो पास्ट की हिस्ट्री है उसे बदल रहे हैं. And at the same time they were distressed by the contrast between the decaying feudal society of India and the progressive capitalist society of Britain. A band of scholars took upon themselves not only the mission to reform Indian society but also to reconstruct ancient Indian history in such a way as to make a case for social reforms and, more importantly, for self-government. Most historians were guided by the nationalist ideas of Hindu revivalism, but there was no dearth of scholars. कोई कमी नहीं थी इस तरह के स्कॉलर्स की जिन्होंने एक रैशनलिस्ट और एक ऑब्जेक्टिव अप्रोच अक्वायर किया, अडॉप्ट किया. टू द सेकंड कैटेगरी, मतलब यही रैशनलिस्ट अप्रोच रखने वाली कैटेगरी से बिलोंग करते थे राजेंद्र लाल मित्रा. उन्होंने पब्लिश किए थे बहुत सारे वैदिक टेक्स्ट और ही ऑल्सो रोट अ बुक entitled Indo-Aryans. A great lover of ancient heritage, he took a rational view of ancient society and produced a forceful tract to show that in ancient times people ate beef. Others sought to prove that in spite of its peculiarities, the caste system was not basically different from the class system based on division of labor found in Europe's pre-industrial and ancient societies. In Maharashtra, Ramakrishna Gopal Bhandarkar and Vishwanath Kashinath Rajwade emerged as two great dedicated scholars, और उन्होंने कई तरह की वैराइटीज, मतलब वेरिड सोर्सेज को कलेक्ट कर कर, पीस टुगेदर कर कर सोशल और पॉलिटिकल हिस्ट्री को रिकंस्ट्रक्ट करने की कोशिश की है इंडिया की. R.G. Bhandarkar reconstructed the political history of Satavahanas of the Deccan and the history of Vaishnavism and other sects like Shaivism. A great reformer, though through his researches he advocated widow remarriage and castigated the evils of the caste system and child marriage. With his unadulterated passion for research, V.K. Rajwade journeyed from village to village in Maharashtra in search of Sanskrit manuscripts and sources of Maratha history. ही डिड नॉट राइट मच बट जो उनकी जो है उन्होंने हिस्ट्री लिखी थी, द हिस्ट्री ऑफ द इंस्टीट्यूशंस ऑफ मैरिज that he wrote in Marathi in 1926 will continue to be a classic because of its solid base in Vedic and other texts, and also because of the author's insight into the stages in the evolution of marriage in India. Pandurang Vaman Kane, a great Sanskritist, wedded to social reform. His monumental works entitled The History of the Dharma Shastra is an encyclopedia of ancient social laws and customs that enables us to study the social processes in ancient India. Devadatta Rama Krishna Bhandarkar was an epigraphist who published books on Ashoka and on ancient Indian political institutions. Similarly, Ramchandra Rai Chaudhary, who reconstructed the history of ancient India from the time of Bharata War or Mahabharata War, that is from the 10th century BC to the end of Gupta Empire. His writings are marked by the impeccable scholarship but show a streak of militant Brahmanism when he criticizes Ashoka's policy of peace. A stronger element of Hindu revivalism appears in the writing of R.C. Majumdar, who was a prolific writer and the general editor of the multi-volume publication History and Culture of the Indian People. K.A. Nilakanta Shastri, the great historian from South India, followed the same approach in his work, A History of Ancient India. But this was more than rectified in his A History of South India. His style is terse, but his writing is lucid. Nilkanta Shastri emphasized the cultural supremacy of the Brahmanas and also highlighted the harmony that prevailed in early Indian society. Some scholars such as K.P. Jaiswal and A.S. Altekar overplayed the role of the indigenous ruling dynasties in liberating India from the rule of the Shakas and Kushanas, little realizing that Central Asians and other uh, um, became an intrinsic part of India's life and did not exploit Indian resources for their original homeland like what Britishers did. However, the greatest merit of K.P. Jaiswal lay in exploding the myth of Indian despotism as early as like in 1910 to 1912. He wrote several articles to show that republics existed in ancient times and enjoyed a measure of self-government. His findings finally appeared in Hindu Polity in 1924. The nature of the republican government presented by him is attacked by many writers including U.N. Ghoshal. Let's move towards non-political history. British historian A.L. Basham, a Sanskritist by training, questioned the wisdom of looking at ancient India from the modern point of view. His earlier writings show his deep interest in the materialist materialist philosophy of some heterodox sects. Later, he believed that the past should be read out of curiosity and pleasure. His book, The Wonder That Was India, is a sympathetic survey of the various facets of ancient Indian culture and civilization, free from the prejudices that plague the writings of V.A. Smith and many other British writers. Basham's book mark a great shift from political to non-political history. The same shift is evident in D.D. Kaushambi's book, An Introduction to the Study of Indian History, later popularized in the civilization of ancient India in historical outline. Kaushambi blazed a new trail in Indian history. His treatment follows a materialist interpretation of history which is derived from the writings of Karl Marx. He presents the history of ancient Indian society, economy, and culture as an integral part of the development of the forces and related to production relations of production. Now it's time for communal approach. Since 1980, some Indian writers and their Western counterparts have adopted an aggressive and irrational approach to the study of ancient India. They identify it with Hinduism under British rule. Colonialist historians deliberately denigrated India's achievement and attributed important elements of Indian culture to external influence. Indian historians underline Indian contribution to world culture. Hence, in the interpretation of history, there was a continuing struggle between colonialism and nationalism. Now, the situation has undergone a change. The struggle is now in between communalism and irrationalism on the one hand, and irrationalism and professionalism on the other. The irrational writers censor all critical studies of the Brahmanical social structure and even supports the caste system by ignoring the social inequity stressed by Manu. That's all in this chapter. Thank you for watching the video. If you like the video, do subscribe the channel.